Floor. Does anybody, we've got two mics, Sue here and Rupert over here. Does anybody want to raise their hand and ask the first question? If not, we'll do it. Is a hand up anywhere? Well, while you're thinking, Jim, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I'm very happy to ask a question to all the panel, I guess, whilst the audience is thinking. A number of business leaders, such as David Jones, who Kate has mentioned, are arguing that transparency is now the most important business ingredient in today's economy. So do you think there is merit in that argument, or do you think that is over-egging the pudding?
I don't think it's over-egging it for us, because I was even thinking, just between Elvis and myself, because we have our goal of reclaiming waste, when you're transparent about it, you have to live by that value. So it forces you to stay on point and on mission, which means that you get things done a lot faster. So with our packaging, of course, our packaging has to be made from waste as well. And as Elvis is designing things, he'll be like, oh, but can't we use a bit of glue? No. Can't we use a bit of tape? No. And it means that you have to do something better and faster, and it makes us better as a company. So actually, it's quite fundamental, and it makes us better.
Roger.
I was thinking around the area of the nature of the problem that you're actually trying to solve in this space. If it's a really significant problem to society in whole, whether it's water or hygiene or something like that, then transparency, I think, is absolutely the right thing to be fully engaged with. The question is the balance between that level of transparency and the maintenance of a competitive edge so that you can continue as a business. Because if everything is completely open and everybody can respond at the same time, then it's the partnerships and the strength of those partnerships that will determine the nature of getting to market and actually being successful in that space. And that's the message that you've got to get through large organisations into the mindset of people, and that takes a bit of time to work through.
I think you're saying it's not the single biggest issue, though, for Unilever. And if let's choose one thing your strategy was founded on, would it be transparency?
At the moment, no. It can't be, because it's still early days in going through that transition.
Kate.
I think there are issues of transparency here that can but shouldn't be conflated. The reason that transparency is so important is, to go back to some of those stats, I think it was David said at the beginning, is you have to look around the world, particularly at developing countries, some of which emerging as the great economic giants of our era, and look at what corruption amounts to in those countries. And I don't want to name countries here because it sounds like a bad thing, but let's start with the big ones. Let's start with China and India and my own home country, where corruption is rife, absolutely rife. And it's no good us sitting here in a well-established democracy and going, gee, lots of corruption in Africa. Come on, what was our MP's expenses scandal? It's corruption. So when you look at it in the big macro sense, what corruption is doing in these countries, and realize the extent to which it is holding back our businesses, because it is, because corruption wrecks and defiles absolutely everything, then you start to see that one of the remedies is transparency. And that's why I get optimistic, because I go, the social media fishes will swim and they will find this thing. I accept it's complex, but just to go back just one point to what Roger was saying, these are terribly important, because as I said, I put my cards on the table. I'm a capitalist. Maintaining competitive edge is absolutely essential. It is the reason that many of the communist regimes and things that we knew when I was a youngster have fallen. Competitiveness absolutely is the gene, the DNA in capitalism, and it helps us to grow, and India and China are lifting gazillions of people out of poverty as we speak. Transparency should not mean, and you and I almost touched on this the other day, that Roger, if they have great IP or idea at Unilever, has to give that away online to P&G. That's nuts. Yeah? That is not what we mean, the kind of transparency we're talking about. It's not that thing. And I think conflating them kills the bigger argument, which is in favor of transparency, and we shouldn't conflate them.
Do you want to come in on that, Bob, before we go to the floor, or?
Yeah, well, I think what Kate was talking is right on, in that I think that I don't know if we even have a proper definition of transparency. So if the idea of transparency is that we should show everything that's happening at all the time, then I don't think that that is what we should be pursuing. I think that, you know,
I was talking about, right? The translucency.
yeah, that's right. So So translucency implies that there's a level of understanding in the seeing. So seeing without understanding is pretty, is pretty worthless. So I would sooner have us strive towards honesty and openness. It's like if you looked at the legal example, someone could be transparent and send over boxes and files of information. But what does that do for you? Because you have no way to process it. So my only fear with transparency is that it will produce volumes of information, but only a small amount of understanding.
Right. In fact, one of the dictionary definition of transparency is letting light in. So maybe that's kind of useful. We're going to take the first question here, and then we'll go around the room.
Yes, Martin Wright, Green Futures Magazine, Forum of the Future. Question for Roger. Big fan of the scale of Unilever's ambition. Just building on Kate's comment, I'm intrigued by this open innovation model. And just wondered, can you give me an example of where it's working in practice, or would that be excessively transparent?
I can probably think of a number of examples which are actually on test in market now, for example. So where we had looking for different product varieties. So a really simple one. We couldn't make soft scoop ice cream. It was a real problem for us. All the aspects of making it and actually getting all the materials and going through all of that. So we went hunting for partners, and we found companies out there that were better at us in different elements of that, both in terms of the equipment and in terms of the ability to put in place. So the partnership created, over a very short space of time, a completely new concept, a new approach, a new way of delivering it. It was the sustainability aspect of that is looking at the materials that are used in those machines, the way it's actually managed and delivered. And the benefit is not only to us, but also to the partners that we work with, because of course the business that drives out of that in terms of the growth of that particular sector of the business.
No, I'm watching.
Oh, sir.
All right, I have got the mic now. Sorry, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting example, but that's just straightforward business, isn't it? You want to do something, you can't do it yourself, so you tender it out to people where they'll have the expertise. How is that open source innovation? I don't quite get the distinction.
It's basically working with external partners. If you take another example of something like OpenIDEO, where we went to them because we were developing what we now call social business innovation, which is like CSR, but instead of just doing it as a charity, you operate it as a not-for-profit business. And under those circumstances, we did the whole development of a business for Ghana for low-income families on their ability to put sanitation into homes through that model. So the process, the whole of the way in which that operates in terms of emptying these loos, getting them clean, getting them round to these low-income families, driving that into these sort of areas was driven through that crowdsourcing environment. So to me, that's an example.
Got a question at the back there.
Hello, David Fries from BNES. It's a question about the age of damage and just how long-lasting that is. I mean, BP was an example you give, but they're still very profitable. And how do you explain someone like Ryanair, when they have a site that says, IHateRyanair.org, that everybody can complain about how terrible they are, yet we all still use them? How does that occur if social media is so important and we're in the age of damage?
Who'd like to answer that one? Yeah, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the issue on Ryanair, and I think it's a great question and absolutely opposite, but here you have cheapest flights, only flights out of Stansted to Perugia, how do I know that? There is no other choice. So there you go, yeah? The minute that you have two like offers of similar price, it's the guy who's transparent and getting it right is where the fishes swim to, yeah? The BP thing is a completely different thing, yeah? But despite their profitability, if you talk about the investment community, those shares plummeted. A huge amount of capital value was wiped out there. So the investment community wouldn't have liked that. Would the investment community have wanted to know about the safety standards, etc., and Halliburton and everybody who was involved in that? Yeah, probably. Did they know? No. Will they ask questions the next time? Yes, they will. It's not a perfect thing. It's not whole. But the minute you have a comparator and fishers can see what you're doing, and when you do real wrong, it's over.
Okay, anybody else on the panel before we pass on? There's a question at the middle there at the back, and then the gentleman here afterwards. So, thank you, over there.
Hi, my name is Magdalena. I work for Orange, not Orange mobile phone, so if you have a problem with your network, don't complain to me. But the reason why I would like to take a voice is that I'm under huge influence of Noam Chomsky and Naomi Klein, and I've been investigating their work for some time now. And I also work for Slough, which means that I have to drive to Bath Road every single day. And there's one particular company that has absolutely fantastic sustainability website, but that particular company is also the company that is the brightest at 5 o'clock in the morning when I drive to Slough. And my issue is with sustainability and transparency and the definition behind these two words, like what's the real chance to actually make it, to actually have a meaning in what we are doing, because we obviously all care, but the brutal reality is that my company, for example, we can put some money towards CRC, we can spend some money on improvements, but if it's going to cost us too much money and we have to redundant the people, we'll move the services to countries in the undeveloping sections of the world where they do not have regulation in place to control it. And the brutal reality is that some companies, or most of the companies, are mainly driven by the profit. If there's no profit, there's all these words, they all sound fantastic and they look fantastic on the paper, but there's nothing behind them. And that's what really concerns me about sustainability, that unless there is a real, I wouldn't say not even CRC, but a real drive behind the corporations and the governments of different countries, our work is really it's words, if you know what I mean. It does not really give the right results of what we're doing.
Yes. Okay.
It doesn't make sense what I'm trying to say.
No, we understand. I think we understand, Roger.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they're very, very good points to raise, because, I mean, one of the aspects of sustainability and being transparent is what you do internally just as much as what you're doing externally. And one of the drivers there, of course, is how do you make people actually act sustainably within your organisations? And the second part of that, which is all about the economics of running businesses, is that changing? I suspect that the situation with that is changing now, in that companies are saying, well, yes, we could go to the lowest cost base anywhere in the world to actually drive our business. And in some circumstances, that has to be done to even stay in business. But I think for many of the more established organisations, there is still now the choice to actually make something different and working on something different. And if we can make that happen, then that, to me, is the right way to actually sort of progress the situation if we possibly can.
Johnny, from you, yes?
Chime in.
Yes. Bob.
Yes. So I think, even hearing the level of frustration in the question sort of speaks largely to how we view the issue of sustainability. Sustainability is hard. When you have basically corporations who have been working at developing systems and ways in which they operate for decades, if not centuries, to turn that ship around, I think, requires a tremendous amount of effort and a lot of patience and time. Which is to say that, if we're going into this equation being very distrustful of the players, You know, we're constantly going to be sort of skeptical. We're constantly going to be sort of worried that we're not making enough progress. For those companies who we know intuitively maybe already get it, then we probably give them a little bit more leeway and we have more patience. But this is a significant challenge. I think sometimes when you're inside of a field and you can feel like you're batting your head up against the wall when you see things aren't sort of making progress as quickly as you like. But if you took a step back and you looked at the question of sustainability, even the term didn't really exist 10 or 15 years ago, and you see how much has happened, and when you see major companies like a Walmart or whomever sort of beginning to see that this is not something that they should do just because it's good for the planet, but it's also good for their business, then you see that there is this sort of tide changing, and that it is something that will require a lot of effort and not something that we can sort of see happen as quickly as we would like, but also helpful to take a step back once in a while and feel good about the progress that collectively as a field we've made.
Thank you. Yes, Kate.
I think the thing that's really important here, and certainly we've seen this with our clients, is that because it can't be perfect, and it cannot be perfect, or Cressy's probably as close to perfect as some of these get, this is not an excuse or a reason for corporate paralysis and for all of us who work in big companies to make no progress. And yes, it's hard, because these are bad things for you personally, because in as much as once you start on that road, you can't stop caring. You can't get yourself off that road. You just go and you go and you go. But if I look, those of you who live in this country, which I guess is most of you, and Bob will certainly be aware of this, if you look at Jamie Oliver and the Food Revolution, please take part in it. It is on Sunday. Please support Jamie's work. If you look at what that boy has gone through in the United States, the controversy that he's caused, some of the things he said would result in things closing down, people losing their jobs, and then the local authority says, he's bad, he's bad, he's bad, and Jamie's going, well, it's okay to kill your kids, but I'm the one who's bad, blah, and all of that stuff. And I know what it's costing him just personally as a man, his time away from his family and what have you. And yet I was in the States last week, and I can't remember, Bob will know, I saw in a news flash 3 states, the first of which was Iowa, and I don't remember the other 2, have closed their pink slime factories. Obesity is now the top of the agenda in the United States. Jamie would never claim that unto himself, and is it perfect? Hell no. But look at the work, and really, God love him, that's just one guy. That's just one young guy starting somewhere.
That's really impressive. Bob, you endorsing that. I've got a gentleman in the front, and there's a lady at the back, I think, was asking first. Is it? Or gentleman at the back? Yes. Yes, you, sir.
It's a gentleman.
Gentleman, sorry.
So if all the companies then become more transparent, what's the trigger for a company to be either rewarded by investors and customers and suppliers, or penalized by investors, customers and suppliers for what they see? The example that we've got is executive pay. Executive pay has been open and transparent for many, many years, but there's been a trigger there's been no new information, but there's been a trigger which has means that there's been a response. So companies, there is a degree of transparency already, maybe, clearly not enough, but what's going to be the trigger for companies to be either rewarded for that or to be penalized for not doing enough?
And the transparency we've got today, though, it hasn't been around for a long time. It's relatively recent that directors' pay is in the public domain. And now you have this shareholder spring where shareholders are going, so you get lots of money for failure,
Cressy or Jim, do you have a comment on this?
I mean, we're a prime example of this. We spent £750 on marketing last year. That was it. So we got no, but and that was mostly like train tickets for me to come to events like this. So we don't our transparency and our communication with our stakeholders is what has led us to be a company. And our transformation, our year 1 to year 2 results, I think we were like 164 times bigger in year 2 than we were in year 1. And we did good in year 1. So we're rewarded every single day. And when we get it wrong, we get a comment from a customer that says, I don't like that new zipper. What the heck were you thinking? And if we get 10 comments like that, we go back to the old way. You know, so we're constantly reacting and working with people, and yeah, we get rewarded every day.
Okay, Jim. The gentleman at the front here had his hand up. We got a mic here?
Okay, thanks very much. Well, early on it was said that everybody must be at the table. My name is Peter Koval. I'm from Occupy London. And I'm very pleased that we've been invited here to take part in this. And I have to say, we don't like corporations much. We don't like large companies. We've got nothing against. I think many of us have got nothing. I can't speak officially for Occupy London, but many people have got nothing against small companies. But we see inherent problems with large companies. So I'd like to address some of the things that Kate Robertson said, who's involved in advertising. Of course, advertising is fundamentally about manipulating people to buy things that they don't need. Okay, there might be an element of information in there as well, but I don't think we can say it's all about allowing people to make a rational choice about what's in their best interests. I mean, I think you'd be a bit naive to believe that. So that when you're selling Coca-Cola or when you're selling McDonald's to people, and especially all over the world, Coca-Cola, you're persuading people to buy fizzy drinks when they don't even have clean water. I think this is an issue. Transparency then, a little bit about transparency. Transparency, I think, is being hoisted on large corporations. I think they're being dragged kicking and screaming towards this, and perhaps it is a good thing. Well, it is a good thing. I'm one of the people who's doing some of the dragging. I'm one of the fishes, and people like myself, and you seem to be happy with that. That's great. Now, I'm not quite so optimistic as Kate was about whether we're entering a golden age when companies are going to, they're going to be forced to be completely transparent. I think we're a long way off that yet. When BP had the disaster with the Deepwater Horizon, this was on all the news channels, etc., and everything. There's a lot less you hear about Shell in Nigeria, although people have aimed to get that out as well. There's a lot less you hear about oil spills in Colombia and so on. So I think the transparency battle...
Can we pick up on the question? I think you asked a very valid question of the panel about the role of advertising.
And then can I finish off, because I've just got one more point to make.
Well, yeah, but if it's a question, can you make it a question, then the panel can answer it.
Right. Well, I think it's a kind of what I'm saying is I'm posing a challenge to what some of the things that you've been saying.
Okay.
And, I'd be very interested to hear how you can come back on that. More fundamentally, we think that the problem is large corporations, and we think that it's in the nature of large corporations to push wages down all over the world, to go for the lowest. They're there to make a profit, so they'll go for the lowest wages, especially in companies that have no trade union legislation. And also, a lot of large companies are up to the neck in the corruption all over the world. We've been doing a lot of work on the company Glencore. You may have seen a panorama about Glencore recently. If not, you can go back and watch on the Listen Again, the iPlayer. Millionaires Behaving Badly, it's called.
Okay.
Go and have a look
all
at
right.
that.
Look, well,
Yeah?
we understand the question. No, I'd like to deal with the question now.
One final thing.
Yeah?
And I will make it short.
Yeah, no, but
this
this is we're having questions and answers, and you've made some very valid questions.
Okay,
Kate, would you like to try and answer the question?
silenced?
Absolutely,
Am I being silenced? Can I just finish? Because I'll tell you,
well,
I'll tell you why.
We have a lot of people that have their hands up.
30 seconds.
We want to hear your point of view, but we want to answer the question.
Yeah.
So you've made a couple of points. We've got a couple of one ex-advertising people on the panel, and it'd be very good to hear their responses. So I'd appreciate if you
In the time you've interrupted me, I could have finished what I was going to say.
No, because you've asked enough questions, and I've got several people. We've got 5 more minutes for questions, and I want to get to other people. Would you appreciate that?
Add something about our positive solutions, because we're often criticised for saying, well, you're always negative. Actually, we believe in localising the economy, we believe in cooperatives, we believe in more worker democracy, and we believe in getting our corporations out of government. Corporations have far too much influence on government. It's skewing our democracy. We're not living in a real democracy anymore.
All right. Well, look, thank you for making the points.
I just want to come back on it. That last list you made there, Totally agree, every single point, okay? Totally agree the point about advertising. I think until relatively recently, when the banks took over our position on the evil list, certainly advertising people were there. Yes, we are the great manipulators. Our issue with One Young World was my boss saying to us, we must use our creative talents to make the world a better place and not to do endless consumerism. So, there are many things that we are trying for and trying to get right, and I think that we are. I personally, as a capitalist, question my role in advertising. Am I just a nasty little lying doppelganger on the face of big, ugly capitalism? I think there are issues there. I think there are issues too with the Occupy movement, where I'm in sympathy of much of the Occupy movement. I think for a lot of us, we're not always clear what you guys want. But as the only business leader at the Davos World Economic Forum who took the time to go and speak to the protesters live on Channel 4 television, I think I do have a right to have a say and have a speak, and I remain firm in my belief that big business can do a huge amount.
Thank you,
But your
Kate.
last list, I agree with.
Thank you, Kate. Bob, you're an ex-ad man. Do you have any comment?
Sure. You know, I have a lot of sympathy for the nature of the comments and the passion which they were delivered. And I think that there was a time where I held the very sort of similar set of convictions in terms of thinking very black and white about how some things are good and some are bad, and good and evil and things like that. And you know, it's interesting, just in terms of a messaging, when someone sort of stands up and the first thing they say is, I hate corporations, it's interesting as if a corporation, and I know that there's obviously, you know, a sense that they've been given rights as if they were a person, but a corporation is a group of people. And I go back to the example that was a real eye-opener for me, which when I mentioned the sausage and the stick and a really awful product. And I thought to the people who were involved in that, some in advertising, some in marketing, some on the brands, and they were good people and friends of mine who were operating in a world in which they weren't being honest with themselves. They didn't see their impact. You know, obesity at the time wasn't a significant issue that was getting a lot of attention. And then I realized that, look, you know, you can sort of rage against the machine and think that's going to change the world, and it does have a role. Or you can try to figure out, how do I speak to a company so that they understand that my interest is in their self-interest? So you don't go, for example, to a company and say, you need to offer health insurance because it's a right. You go to a company and say, you need to have good benefits so your people aren't sick and missing work and being less productive. Now you're speaking in their language. So I think that we probably share very similar desires in terms of outcomes. But I think that what we need to do is have a conversation, not a series of speeches, by which we can get to a place where we understand that there are just different motivations for different players in society, and we need to figure out how to honestly bridge them.
Jim, well done. Jim.
Well, listen, we've got a few minutes left. I've got a question that's come in from online. How are companies finding the balance between transparency and maintaining the necessary confidentiality to ensure that they stay competitive? And I think this is a really important point. Maybe, Roger, do you want to answer that?
At the moment, I would say that it's being transparent about the issues that need to be addressed. And once you've got those on the table, then you've started that process. As people get engaged, and certainly from your comments that you made, it's getting engaged at that point in time. If you join that interaction, then you have the opportunity to influence whether they're small companies, big companies involved in the process of delivery. Then you're actually in that debate and you're actively in that component. And let's face it, that's really then the way in which you can actually then take something forward by that sort of network.
I think you also have to not be so afraid all the time. You know, my bag is there. People can cut it up and do their best to copy it. But when someone says to me, oh, I found some fire hose, how do I make a bag? I have to explain to them. That's kind of like saying, I just hit a cow with my car. How do I turn it into a bag? You know, the work that goes into it is so extensive that people can't just copy it. It's not that easy. They can't copy the relationships. They can't copy the work that we've put into it. So I don't think you always have to be so afraid. You know, Unilever has brands that people can't copy overnight. They've got infrastructure, distribution mechanisms. So it's easy actually to share because you can't give away too much.
Bob, did you want to add something?
I heard a wonderful quote by there's a great designer here in New York named Alan Chochinoff, who once said that people who are afraid to give away their ideas are concerned that there won't be a good one following it. So it's a sense that, you know, that there's a premium on ideas when the reality is if you get it out there, someone will iterate on it, and that you by nature will also benefit from it. So I understand and believe in the importance of intellectual property and things like that, but I do feel that sometimes we are a little too cautious of it without realizing that there's tremendous upside.
Okay. We've just got a couple more minutes. A question at the back there.
Yes, hello. My name is Rebecca Bateman with Domino Printing. As an SME, we're just sort of beginning our journey in sustainability, communications, transparency, et cetera. We're really struggling with what sorts of things to disclose, and especially in regards to transparency, and just wondering if the panel had any advice for a company like mine, examples of best practice. What would your advice be on how to get it right?
Who'd like to take that first? Chrissy.
I think if you're a printing company, the best thing is to draw a map of what your inputs are and your outputs are, so you have an actual tangible thing. These are the things we use, these are the things we consume, and this is the potential pollution that we create. And draw a picture of that, and then point arrows to where you think you guys may have problems, and get everyone in your company to work on it. And maybe if you feel you don't have the expertise, bring in an ISO 14001 auditor or someone from the outside. But draw a really simple visual diagram that everyone in the business can engage with. Because once it's there, you will be able to pick holes in it. And then pick one thing and say, look, this year we're going to start with this. Next year we'll move on to something else. No one's going to crucify you for only being able to tackle one problem at a time.
Yeah, anybody else? Well, Jim, we're running into the closing stages. Is there anything that you'd like to sort of throw in as your chief strategist role here to, kind of wrap it up for everybody here?
I mean, I think we're all, funnily enough, Peter and actually all of us here are all we've got the same desires for this world and the same beliefs, and I think it's just a question of how we're going to get there, and I think...
Just to clarify, I didn't say that I don't like people who work in, or we don't like people who work in corporations. We said...
It's the corporate entity, yeah.
Size of corporations and the consequences that brings. Okay.
Yeah. But I think what's come across strongly from tonight is that there is a trend towards transparency, and it starts. I think the question that Simon asked about corporate pay, director pay, was very illuminating, because that information started to become transparent a few years ago, and funds have started to work out how to mobilise their thinking around it, and it takes a few years for that to happen. And I think what we're seeing now is a growing use of transparency. I saw George Monbiot suggesting last week that the Freedom of Information Act be extended to corporations, and apparently there is a clause which would enable it to do it. And if they said, okay, on issues of the environment or social issues, then we will allow this act to be extended to companies. And how dramatic would that start to change things? So I think there's all these initiatives that starts off with a George Monbiot blog, but that a few years later ends up happening. And I think actually the director pay is a great example of how these powers will be unleashed, and I think it has big implications, and I think it's why Elvis and Cressy will be a big business in the future.
Excellent. Well, look, I think that sort of brings us to the end of the session. Can we thank the panel very much? And thank you all for your questions. We're going to. There's a lot of issues that we can now debate in the tables. Just before you go to the tables, I just draw your attention to the note in your documentation on the Green Energy Strategy meeting happening in June. And those of you interested in best energy strategies may be interested to follow up on that. But we're now going to go to our tables. 15 tables. If you don't have a table, you can join one where there's a space. If you've been assigned one, your name is on the wall at the back. And we'll have until about 8:15 with chairman of the tables reviewing the issues to apply transparency to our organizations. So thank you very much, and see you later. And we'll have drinks in the back at 8:15.